Artlist.io.
Hello, and welcome to Rainbow Dreamcatcher,
The Love Podcast.
My name is Nilla, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist and relationship coach. I travel the world helping individuals and partners to learn the skills they need to have a healthy and happy relationship.
And I'm Big Sexy, her loving husband and co-host, here to provide levity.
Levity. Yeah, we got it that time. All right. Welcome to our colorful humans out there listening. And today we have got a topic. First of all, I have to make some declarations before we start with this topic.
Okay.
Just off the top, we're talking about in-laws, but I want to be super clear that I'm not talking about my present mother-in-law. I love my mother-in-law.
Right.
Shout out to Miss Margaret. Absolutely love and have a great relationship.
But I also love my in-laws.
Yay.
I do. Shout out to Diane and Cliff.
Shout out to Diane and Cliff.
Clifton.
So.
Did you go? Is Clifton?
Yeah, both.
Both? Okay.
Neither. I mean, honestly, we wouldn't be calling them by their first names except to
except
preserve
right
their
now,
privacy.
Right.
But
yes.
I am probably going to share some experiences from my previous mother-in-law as I was married before.
Right.
So when I am referring to my mother-in-law, y'all, I have a wonderful mother-in-law right now. I'm talking about the one before this.
Got it. Yeah. And also like my brothers and sisters-in-laws.
Yeah, we can talk about those too.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
We're really talking about,
but we're talking about in-laws and doing kind of also like a generalized in-laws type of deal.
In-laws being those people that, when you partner with another person, they come typically attached to other folks that they have grown up with in their lives, their family of origin, and we're just talking about relationships with that particular family of origin. But I tell you, when we talk about in-laws, typically we're not talking about siblings. We can get into that a little bit.
Okay.
But primarily we are talking about mothers and fathers-in-law, as that's where we tend to have the most contact. That's often where we tend to have the most conflict.
Right.
Though I have sat with folks that have had challenges with siblings-in-laws.
Right.
But more frequently, I actually hear the challenge happening about how families integrate, particularly around control and authority and family norms that typically we're talking about the in-laws.
Right. And this is also a good time to talk about in-laws because people are experiencing in-laws right around the time of this episode because it's just after Thanksgiving, just before Christmas.
If you're an American listener, this is just after Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
For our international audience, this is going
just
to be just
after
a few weeks before Christmas.
It's just after American Thanksgiving.
Which is meaningless to you.
Unless you know some Americans. Right, exactly.
Even then, probably meaningless.
Right. Yeah, so this is the time of year when a lot of people are spending extra time with their in-laws.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a family time, right? So I did my research on this one.
Okay.
Even though I've had some personal experience, I will just, again, put it out there at the front. I had a terrible relationship with my first mother-in-law.
Okay.
I mean, it was like bad. It was bad.
All right.
And
what made it bad? I mean, I don't know how much you want to get into it.
Oh no, I get into it. I mean, we're talking years ago. And
okay.
She ain't my mother-in-law no more, obviously. So one, she just really disliked me.
Okay.
Just in general, I think that was one of those where there are 4 areas typically where people have issues with in-laws.
Mm-hmm.
One is going to be children. Should you have them? When should you have them? Once you have them, how do you raise them? And then also whether or not the in-laws will follow the rules set by parents.
Got it.
Right. So children is a big one. Holidays is another big one.
Right.
And often that, again, has to do with logistics. So whose family are you going to spend the holiday with? How much time are you going to spend? Do those people feel who are the quote unquote losers in that? Do they feel slighted?
Right.
How do they respond? Do they assign blame? There's a lot that happens around the holidays. Then there is a struggle for authority. Oftentimes, if there is, this often comes out as like, you're not good enough for my child,
Okay.
kind of thing.
Right.
In which there are, maybe I would consider that like, I don't know, a lack of boundaries, right? In terms of like the decision making of the adult child and questioning the decision making of the adult child. Like, is this the right person for you? Maybe that person isn't what the parent envisioned, or has qualities other than what they would wish in their child's partner.
Right.
And that often comes out in like the, you're not good enough for my, son, daughter, child,
right,
etc. And then what we'd call genuine discord, which is what I was engaged with, which is just, they just straight up don't like you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, there was, we weren't unaligned on children. We weren't unaligned on holidays. We didn't really spend holidays,
They
for
didn't
me.
like you.
Yeah, no, they just didn't like me, just straight up. And I say they really only met one.
Right.
So she didn't like me, and was very, very, very aggressive about it.
Right.
So things like, even though I, have a given name, she would never actually say my name. So
gotcha.
For, I don't know, it was probably like the first 6 years, I think.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, like, we weren't talking like, I just forgot your name. It was just one of those,
this was an active. I'm not going to say your name.
I'm just not going to say your name. So my name's Nilla, and she'd be like, hello, Nelly. Hello, right. Nelson. Hello.
Right.
Hello, Nefertiti. I'd be like, oh, come on now. Let's stop with this.
Right.
But it just went on and on and on.
What about the flip side?
What flip side?
Where your parents felt about your spouse? His in-laws.
Yeah, here's the thing. They also did not like him.
Interesting.
But they were not so, my parents aren't so super expressive about those things. And, I tend to I've always been very independent. I think, I left home at 18. I never really returned except for very brief periods of time. Even while I was in school, I would go home for, a few weeks at a time.
Right.
But, I was, definitely out of the house by 18. And so they didn't really get an opportunity. They typically would express those things to me, as opposed to expressing those things to
outwardly in his presence
to him. Even though there were some times when they were like on the edge, which I could tell how much they didn't like him, because they would kind of tip into that area that was like, oh, is this about to get? Yeah. So they were very happy to meet you.
Yeah, your in-laws love me. Your parents, not your in-laws also love me too, because my mother loves me. I realize that, but yes,
but your in-laws,
yes,
love you.
Yes, my in-laws love me.
Yes, very much so, very, very much so, and likewise.
Right.
Yeah, I have a really great relationship with my current mother-in-law, which is such a wonderful blessing, because it can really throw a wrench into relationship if someone's parents or family actively dislike their partner. And it's a really difficult space to try to navigate. One, because like, I don't know these people. And I'm now a part of their family. That's often can be the case. Hold on one sec.
3, 2, 1.
So, I've sat with a lot of folks who have had this experience where they have found someone that they love. It's a good, healthy, and wonderful relationship. They want to move forward or have moved forward with committed partnership, and they are running up against this roadblock where their in-laws are just not accepting of them for often one of these 4 reasons, and other reasons, right? But it's a tough thing, because it really can put a wedge between you and your spouse.
Okay.
And it is very delicate to handle, because of course we're dealing with family relationships. And so we are dealing with, people who love each other. We are dealing with systems that can seem very normative, right?
Right.
The idea that like, oh, don't worry about my mom. That's just the way
That's just mom.
just
That's
the way
what
she is.
That's just my mom.
That's just my mom.
Yeah,
or
I
that's
know,
just
I
my
know, but that's
dad.
just my mom.
Yeah,
That's
right.
just my dad.
And that can be super disempowering. And it can also be drive a wedge between partners. So it's an area that I think is really important to cover. And again, I have encountered this over and over and over again in my practice and in my coaching business, where folks are just struggling with this area. So the main question people come up with is, what do you do? Right. So we know that this is going to happen. There are jokes about it in every stand-up comedian's, set.
Anybody who's married or been married has a joke about their mother-in-law or father-in-law.
Yeah. So we know it's incredibly common. It's a thing. And the thing people want to know is, what do I do? How do I fix this? How do I address this? And, it goes back to what I think is true for almost every relationship, and that is, how do we set appropriate boundaries?
Mm-hmm.
And the question, of course, is that it's different to set boundaries with in-laws than it is with your partner, whom you have committed to creating a lifelong partnership with. Hopefully they are open to creating boundaries, but your parents-in-law haven't. Right? So how do you create boundaries with folks who may not be interested in co-creating those boundaries with you? So I have found over time that there are a few things that you can do that can be helpful in this situation, which is actually a really stressful situation, particularly if folks have children.
Right.
That can be super stressful, very frustrating, very disempowering. So the first thing you got to be able to do is you have to be able to talk to your spouse. You have to be able to outline for your spouse your experience, what has been happening. Sometimes these things happen outside of their awareness. Like, people can be different kind of ways and can act kind of funny sometimes, right? So being clear with your spouse about what is happening, having clear and open communication can be incredibly, incredibly helpful. And then we got to talk about, what does that communication look like? Well, first, it looks like a united front, right?
Right.
The thing that I think can be most damaging when there is a rift between a partner and parents of their spouse is that the partner can feel torn, right? I love my family. I love my partner. And so the default setting seems like, I'm just going to stay out of it. I'm not going to pick a side. Wrong. That actually, to me, is a breeding ground for more conflict, because you now have folks that are on different pages.
Right.
You are the person that connects those folks, and you have decided to opt out of any engagement.
Right.
Very rarely works. I've never seen it work really well.
Right.
And, the reality is, if you are siding with your parents, well, I don't know, I might wonder about that, right? Unless your spouse is doing something egregious.
Right.
Typically, the united front you want to create is one with your chosen partner, right? So there's no, when we talk about in-law problems, the first thing you have to do is recognize that this is an our problem. This is an us problem. This is not a you problem with my family. Right. This has to be
you versus them.
Yeah. Or them versus you. This is us versus this problem.
Right.
Right. As opposed to us versus them.
Right. Yes, it's us versus the problem. Right.
Yeah. But it's really important to first have a united front. And you have a united front by first talking, right? Focusing on your feelings, owning those things that are true. And here's the key. It's going to be important, if you find yourself in this situation, to own your feelings and discuss the circumstances, but try to avoid criticizing your in-laws.
Okay.
Right? You want to try to avoid being critical, because criticism has a tendency to engage a protective response, and also a defensive response, right? Like, I don't know about you, I love my parents. if anybody says something terrible about my parents and they're not me, well, I'm probably going to have something to say about that. Right. So you don't want to enact that protective instinct. Right.
Right.
And, it's never good to criticize those folks that you plan to walk through life with for an extended period of time. Right. So you want to approach your spouse the way that you would want to be approached if they had a problem with your parents.
Okay.
Right. Which is, don't criticize them. Share with me what's true for you. Share with me your feelings and experience so that we can tackle this together.
Right.
Right.
You also don't want to I do improv. You don't want to yes and any criticism from your if your partner is criticizing their parents.
Well, your partner can criticize their parents all they want.
That's what I'm saying. As that partner, you don't want to yes and that. You don't. I mean, you can maybe yes it if there's whatever, but you don't want to and, because and means you add something.
Oh yeah, no, you don't want to be adding criticism, even if they're criticizing.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Now I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, you don't want to pile on.
No. Definitely no dog piles.
And it's not an open. Oh, I'm glad she finally said something. Now I can go ham.
Let me go ham on your parents, you guys. No.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
No, don't do any of that. Now, here's what's interesting. And this is the part that I think people sometimes find difficult about that united front. That means also that the spouse whose parent is either being toxic or overstepping or in some way making your partner uncomfortable. Listen very carefully, spouse. You are the point person. No sending your spouse out to go talk to your parents, right? Which I have seen. Oh my gosh. Wow. Yeah, no, this is definitely one in which the spouse who is in the middle can't step back, like we were talking about. They have to actually take an active role.
Yeah.
And that active role has to be in advocacy of your partner.
Right.
Right. Now, again, we're assuming that your partner hasn't done anything egregious. They didn't steal nothing from your mama. Right. We're talking just run-of-the-mill in-law challenges, right? That if that is the case, then yeah, you definitely want to make sure that you, as the child of these folks and as the spouse of your partner, you got to understand that you have to take an active role. You can't just send your spouse out to negotiate. Right. Now, as the partner that's having a challenge, one, you can't expect that folks are going to change because just because you've said something, right? That's also what's really challenging. Part of what that person has to do is they have to ensure that they are taking in not just their own perspective, but also the family's perspective as much as possible, right? Difficult to do when you're feeling attacked or, pushed out or that you don't belong. But the reality is that these families have operated this way probably for a very, very long time. Mm-hmm. Right. And so when family systems become engaged, part of what makes it difficult for the spouse to intervene is because often they go right back to the family system.
Right.
Right. So I go back to being, I don't know, I'm an old enough person. And even for me, when I go back home, there are some roles that I just slip into very easily because that's the role I play in my family system. Right. So that when I come in and your partner falls into that family role, if it's not a role in which they are used to challenging their parents or in any way advocating against or in support of others, outside of their parents, that might be something that's super, super challenging for them. Right. Okay. So you want to consider that as you consider what it is in identifying what exactly are the changes that need to take place. Now here, when we talk about boundaries, it's really important to know that there's a difference between a boundary and a limit. Right. And oftentimes folks think that limits and boundaries are the same. Meaning, I think I'm setting a boundary when I say, if that person does such and such one more time, I'm done. That's not a boundary, actually. That's a limit, right? And we want to set our boundaries much closer in, right?
Okay.
I don't want to set it in a place where you are on my last nerve and now I got to bounce you.
Right.
I want to set it in a place.
Let's set it to help stop you from getting on that last nerve.
Exactly that, right? So a limit is to take people out, right? A boundary are the necessary behaviors and structures to keep people in.
Got it.
Right? So when I'm thinking about a boundary, when I'm thinking about the things that I want to change, what I actually have to identify are those things that are going to preserve our ability to have a relationship. Let me give you an example.
Okay.
Let's say let's see, I'll give an example from, I'll change some of the details. So let's say that there is a young couple, they have a child that is 5 years old, and this child has a very delicate stomach.
Okay.
And so they have to, as a part of their family system, maintain really strict control of what the child eats.
Okay.
Because they will have all kinds of gastrointestinal distress. They may have to go to, see a doctor or a hospital, but they are very, very vigilant about what the child eats.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the challenges might be that a grandparent wanting to grandparent would often want to then give this child things that were definitely on the no-go list.
Right.
Right? How would you handle that situation?
Okay, so if I internalize it and say we have a child and our child has a sensitive stomach.
Well, let's say we have a fox. We have a dog.
We have a dog.
And that dog has a very sensitive stomach.
Yes.
Which he kind of sort of does.
He does. And he doesn't eat the people food.
He doesn't eat the people foods.
But my mother.
But your mom.
Wanting to be a doggy mom.
Wants to be a dog grandmom.
Has some pepperoni.
Tons of roni.
That she decides to feed Fox.
Right.
Right.
Repeatedly.
Well, the first I have to address it. Like that feels pretty clear cut. Like, no, you can't feed the dog regular people food. He has a strict diet.
I want to be a grandmother and I should be a grandmother, and you stopping me from showing love to my granddog.
There are other ways you can show love to this dog. Matter of fact, we'll buy you your own bag of treats that are just yours, mm-hmm. that you can give the dog when you want to feel grandmotherly
mm-hmm.
to
mm-hmm.
our doggy dog.
All right. So, yeah, I love it. So you're communicating the changes that need to take place.
Mm-hmm.
You're supporting the boundary and you're communicating the boundary. What happens if she just looks at that bag of treats and pulls out the pepperoni because puppy love pepperoni?
Of course, it's pepperoni.
Right? What do you do then?
What
do you do, hotshot?
Oh, no.
What do you do?
Oh, no. Well, and then I have to remove the dog.
Yeah.
If I can't change the behavior,
mm-hmm.
And express it like this can't happen, then you got to remove access to the dog. And that would hurt. It would suck, but you got to do what's best for your family.
Yeah, so that's true. The other part of this is once we've set the boundary and communicated the boundary, you also have to, and specifically you as the partner has communicated the boundary, you then have to also discuss how and when and under what circumstances you will change your own behavior, right? That includes not just our actions, but also our reactions. How am I going to respond to this?
Mm-hmm.
How am I going to let this alter my mood? How am I going to let this alter my behavior? And, in some ways, how we continue to educate about how to maintain healthy and good relationship where possible, right?
Right.
But it does require that sometimes we have to change our own behavior and enforce the boundaries that we've set, which is like, I don't know if Fox has this specific diet, he can't be on any other diet, you refuse to do that, then unfortunately you have no access to be able to feed my dog.
Yeah, I think, and that would, also though, I can imagine, speaking of, controlling your reaction as well, I'd be upset.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be really mad at my mother because, like, I set this boundary, and I've also given options of how to maintain that type of relationship. That then shows a lack of respect.
Well, yeah, and sometimes the challenge that you have is that there is a lack of boundary as a general rule in the
Right.
family system, right? So
Right.
we don't anticipate that everyone is going to have the same level of respect for boundaries or see boundaries in the same way that we do.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I would say, and this is just in terms of establishing those relationships, is that a lot of folks wait until there is an issue to then try to set boundaries, in which case it looks like, people start to feel like this is retaliation and they're just doing that to be mean to me or
Right.
So one of the things I think partners can do, particularly around in-laws and family, is to discuss and where possible, set limits early on. Set limits super, super early, right? So that there is a clear understanding. And of course, we can't, anticipate every circumstance in which you're going to need a boundary.
Right.
But there are some circumstances, particularly with the help of the spouse, like, I don't know, I know my parents, right? I know that there are maybe, let's assume, let's take this off of you. Let's put it onto me, right?
Okay.
So let's assume that my parents are very, very, very conservative. Right?
Okay.
So let's assume my parents are very conservative and that you as my spouse disagree with their political views.
Yep.
Right. And that any discussion of those political views is going to lead to some kind of argument.
Okay.
Well, if I know that, right? Not that I know that, but that if I have some inkling of that, I might have to establish the boundary that says, as we establish this relationship, we're not going to talk about that.
Right.
We're just not going to engage that, right? I don't think what you're saying is going to change anything for me. I don't think what I'm saying is going to change anything for you. And it has the potential to cause conflict. So we can establish those kinds of boundaries early on.
Right.
Right.
I was thinking interesting that it's for parents with a lot of kids,
like mine,
like yours, right? If all kids got married,
yep,
that is a lot of navigation of different sets of in-laws and keeping track of. I can see why the default setting is I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do, right? Because if I got to keep track of their in-laws and the boundaries set with their in-laws and the boundaries set with those in-laws and I can feed their dog whatever I want to, but I can't feed that dog whatever I want to.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if the families are close knit, that's possible. I just, in terms of keeping track of other folks' in-laws, right?
Journal.
Well, no, not necessarily have a journal. One, I think that those boundaries are going to evolve according to the needs of the partnership, right? So the idea that I don't have children and my siblings have children, they're going to have different boundaries, right? That, aren't, are going to be pretty attendant to whatever's happening with that particular child.
Right.
The other question too is, and this is something that is not true, I think, for my family, but oftentimes we don't interact very frequently outside of the holidays. So that there would be a whole lot of conflict. If it's a close-knit, large group, of course, any set of any large set of relationships is going to be more complex.
Right.
But the principles are still the same. Right. And just having a large family, it's not. I mean, it's just different. Assume that they're unconnected. Then we're just talking about different people. And listen, I can go to work and know that I can't cuss out my boss. Right. Or I can't, there are certain things that I can do at home that I can't do at work. Right. So we understand that there are differing boundaries for different folks. Right.
Got it. Yeah.
And that, to me is something that I think just kind of occurs pretty naturally. There's not really a cookie cutter for how that takes place. So yeah, large or small, the key here is boundaries. How do I set boundaries? How do I maintain boundaries? How do we communicate? And then how do we advocate for and enforce them? And the key here, y'all, the key is that it's your spouse that enforces them. If you're the one with the challenge and the in-laws,
The spouse enforces it.
Step up. Here's what happens when the spouse doesn't step up.
Okay.
It just gets worse.
Right.
If you think that standing back and not engaging is going to make it better,
it'll make it worse.
It's just going to make it worse.
Right? I mean, there are entire, sitcoms based on that premise.
Yes, right. Except it's not funny in real life.
It's definitely not funny in real life. And
it can lead to a lot of stress. It can lead to a lot of strain. It can put a wedge between partners. That really doesn't need to be there. Sometimes that wedge is unintentional. That's just the result of the strife. Sometimes that wedge is intentional, right? As in, I don't like your partner, and so I'm going to try to put a wedge between you. Either way, it is up to the adult child of that set of parents to navigate their own parental connection.
All right.
Yeah. So that's in-laws. So, I mean, take that to Christmas, y'all.
Yeah. So, boundaries and communication.
Mm-hmm. Advocacy and limits.
Advocacy. And then
advocacy, enforcement, and limits.
And limits. Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Boundary being, these are the rules of engagement if we're going to stay in. Limits being, this is where we have to stay out, right? Or in some way change or alter behavior to support the changes that we need to see, right? And sometimes that means moving away or moving towards a distance with those parents in some ways. Sometimes that just means altered behavior, like, I don't know, you get to see the dog, but like not by yourself.
Right.
You don't get to hang out with the dog by yourself.
How exasperated is that situation if they all live in the same house?
Oh, so very exasperated. And here's the reason why. One, when you're talking about being in someone's home, there are differing levels of power and authority based on whose home it is, right? Who's paying the bills in that home. We had the wonderful experience of living with your mom for a period of time earlier this year.
3 long months.
3 months, roughly.
Long.
Yeah. It was long for you. It was fine for me. Mm-hmm. And, we were in a home that was not our home, in which case, I don't know, it seemed pretty natural to me that we would follow the rules of the home as they had been established. Irrespective of necessarily what I thought about it, because it was not my home. Now, we would have a different dynamic if we were in our home and your mom came to live with us. That would be a very different dynamic.
Yes.
Because, then we're talking about power. We're talking about, some of those base resources that we have visceral reactions to.
Right.
Home is one of those base resources that we have visceral reactions to. Anything you would have changed about the in-law interactions? No, you know what? I said we're not gonna talk about my mom-in-law. And so you know what? I'm not about to put myself on blast here out on the internet either. So let me pull that back and rephrase
that statement.
Yes. I don't think there was anything, and I don't want to learn about it here today.
Right.
Colorful humans.
Right. Right. And there are stories, there are tales. If you want us to go into detail, hit us up in the comments, and we may address you on it. Send us a question. Send us a question, and maybe we'll address it.
But we ain't gonna do it on here.
Right.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know if there's anything more to say about that. I mean, do you have any other questions?
My thought, just dipping into siblings.
Yeah.
Right. Because.
Well, I have a ton of siblings, so I can understand.
And I have 0.
Why sibling relationships might pop into your brain.
In my brain, right? Because all of a sudden I went from having no brothers and sisters to having 5 brothers and sisters in laws. And again, different levels of relationship and interaction.
Sure.
And I remember the desire being, I had wanted to get to know them all, because that's my nature.
Yeah. Sure.
That's kind of the guy I am. That's who Big Sexy is. I want to get to know them all. I want talk, see how things are going, and whatever.
Mhm.
But that was not your family dynamic.
No.
And so I had to adjust
Mm-hmm.
to your family dynamic and get with the concept that, maybe not a lot of contact happens throughout the year, and that's just the thing. So I'm okay with that.
Okay.
I had to adjust, and I'm okay with that.
Okay.
I love my family.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
And you had it easy. You didn't have any.
Well, that's not necessarily true.
I don't have any siblings that you had to adjust to.
You didn't have any siblings, but you certainly had cousins.
True.
And your cousins behave as if they are
Woo,
your siblings.
That's true.
So I definitely had to get to know cousins.
Oh man, I remember when sidebar. I remember when we were at my grandparents' wedding anniversary.
Yes.
This is before we got married.
Yes.
And they were grilling us about getting married. Do you recall that?
We
were sitting having dinner
several times when we got grilled, but you have to remind me of which one.
This was at the special restaurant. We went there for a special event, their ceremony.
I thought it was your uncle's.
It might have been my uncle's 50th.
I think it was your uncle's.
My uncle, yeah, my uncle's 50th. Not my grandparents. My uncle's 50th. Wedding anniversary,
mm-hmm.
And then my cousins were like, just heavy grilling us, and I sincerely thought that they would play a bigger role post marriage
mm-hmm.
than they have.
Oh, really? What role did you anticipate they would play?
I thought not like I thought they would be engaged more than they were because they seemed to be so interested prior to us getting married.
Oh yeah,
like they seemed to be deeply invested on whether or not I was going to get married. And then once I got married, okay,
mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished. We'll leave you guys alone now.
Get out.
Yeah.
And the other part of that too, and I probably think what made the more difference than us just getting married, there would probably be greater involvement if we had children. Right. And we don't have children, and so there's no real reason to be in my business. Right. That's my thought, but who knows? That's just the way it turned out. Right. But at the beginning, yes, getting to know your cousins and your aunts, that was a significant in-law connection.
Interesting.
Even though it wasn't siblings, it was pretty close.
Cousin-in-law, yeah, that's accurate.
I treated it as your siblings.
Right.
Yeah. So
cool deal. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Colorful Humans, if you guys have any stories about your in-laws, hit us up. Shoot us an email. Let us know. Send us your tales of the in-laws in your life, one way or the other.
Yeah. Do you have great in-laws? Tell us about that and what makes that relationship wonderful. Have you had toxic in-laws, as I have had? I've had both, fortunately.
Right.
Fortunately, the toxic in-law was first.
Right.
Speaking of stories, can I tell you my toxic in-law?
Yes, story? Of course.
So it was about Christmas. Had gone to his parents' home. Okay. And one of the things we had done...
Was it just his mother?
Just his mom.
Okay.
Just his mom.
I never knew that.
Yeah, no, just his mom. I met his dad once. He was in a nursing home.
Oh, gotcha.
He wasn't really lucid or cognizant.
Right.
So I never got to know this person's father. I did get to know his mother quite a bit. And, the whole idea that she didn't like me, well, one Christmas, they lived in, upstate somewhere, right? So it was super, super cold. It was, windy and chilly, and there was snow on the ground. It was just before Christmas. Yeah, it was terrible. And we had gone for Christmas, and my mother-in-law's vacuum cleaner, like a little electric sweeper, had broken.
Okay.
So there was this big old storm outside. We both sat down and said, "Hey, didn't realize that this was broken. We're going to go on ahead and get you one of these, but we're going to get it tomorrow because, snow outside is terrible." And don't you know, my mother all looked at me and said, "Well, why don't you get down on your hands and knees and start picking some stuff up off the floor?"
Ooh.
Yes! I was like, "Oh, what?" I'm sorry. What? that was one of those times I really had difficulty holding my tongue. I think I said something along the lines of, and this is a gazillion years ago, you'll be able to tell, like, are the Obamas coming over tonight? Is something happening that I am unaware of that would make that like a priority for tonight? Because I'm not getting on my hands and knees to get nothing up off the floor.
Wow.
For anything. Like, but I mean, when I say it was aggressive, it was aggressive.
Right.
I mean, it was very aggressive and very pointed. And I just had to kind of like.
And it never got better.
It never got better. It never got better. The good news was that we did not live close by.
Right.
And so I did not have to have an awful lot of interaction, but almost every interaction I had
was super negative.
Super negative, which was really odd too, because it was one of those where it was done in private, but never in public. Right. So publicly, it was like, hey, this is going to be my daughter-in-law, and this is my new, and isn't she wonderful, and blah, blah, blah.
And be sure to ask her name, because I don't never know what to say.
Yeah, but I tell you what, behind closed doors, there was a whole another ball game, and man, it was just very nasty. Wow. Very negative. So, yeah, that was a red flag.
Right. So if you guys have questions about your families or stories about your in-laws, please hit us up. Yeah. You can send us an email at rainbowdreamcatchertlp@gmail.com. Would you like to hear a question?
Yes. What's our question?
That was a very heavy topic, so I'm gonna give
Was it heavy? Oh no.
Well, it was fun, but in-laws
is hard.
It's a thing.
It's a thing.
Let's have a lighthearted question.
Let's have a lighthearted question.
Yeah, I don't want to get like it was not a super heavy topic, but it was just heavy enough that I don't want to make it heavier.
Yeah, let's not weigh it down.
Yeah, I want to lift it up.
Let's lift it up.
Build it up.
Right.
This is an interesting enough. This is our friend David, who sent us both a serious question and a semi-serious question. Okay. And so I'll do the semi-serious question for this one.
Okay.
David asks, what are your politics in regards to toilet seats? Always up, always down, or just remove the damn seat?
Okay, so I'm just going to go straight up, hard line. Put the seat down, y'all. Put the seat down. Put it down. Keep it down. Your thoughts?
I, on the other hand, am very much in the camp. Well, the last option, you can't remove the seat because I'm not sitting on cold porcelain when I got to poo.
Did you have to?
I'm of the belief that the toilet seat has two locations, up and down.
This is why we fight.
And you can move it to whatever position you need it in.
Okay, so counterpoint. I shouldn't have to touch the toilet seat. If you're already touching it to move it up, touch it to put it back down when you're done.
See, I'm of the mind that
I'm not done with my counterpoint.
Okay.
And that's the way it should be. Now I'm done.
I, on the other hand, my counterpoint is that we both have to touch the toilet seat.
No, we don't.
An effort to make it be where we need it.
No, we don't. See, because it's already down as the default. So that when you lift it up, you take it out of the default position and you should put it back down into the default position.
See, I believe that maybe the default position is up.
It's wrong. It's not, because you don't want the toilet seat up.
When I need it up occasionally.
Right, occasionally, and I need it down all the time. Yeah. So keep it down. So 3 out of the 4 instances in which a toilet seat might need to move, 3 of those, the preferred position is down.
Yes.
So put it down.
No.
Just put it down.
I am of the belief. I'm an ecologist.
If you're that's not a word, but even if you are, the ecologist would put it down 3 out of the 4 times and leave it down. Just leave it down. Just leave it down. The equality isn't just putting it back down.
The equality is
just put it back down.
To move it. That's where we are, and we're gonna. That's
Well, this is the very few times I tell you that you're just wrong.
I try to accommodate.
No, you don't.
I do so. I try. I very loosely when I think about it.
When I think about it,
if I give it some thought, Like, okay,
You'll never give it any
one
thought.
but a lot of times when I'm using the toilet frequently, it's in the middle of the night, and nope, I'm not thinking.
Right, which is why you got to make it a habit.
It-
That's why you just have to make it a habit.
My
That
habit
when you
is to
use
leave
the
it up.
restroom, you put it down. That's that habit.
I
It's
think
a habit.
I think
It's a habit forming
I think
opportunity for you.
to make the work equal across the board.
What work? Just put it down.
Put them both down.
I'd be okay with that. Just
Put the
just
lid.
Put it down.
Put them both down. Put the
Just-
lid and the seat
just
down.
put it all
there
down.
you go, listeners. That's the answer. Put both the lid and the seat down. That way, no matter who's going to the bathroom, somebody got to lift something up.
So I'd just like to point out to the listeners that the default is down. So we've got a definitive answer from both parties that the default and the answer to your question, David, is 100% down.
Both.
Down.
All of it.
Down.
Put them both down.
Down.
If you don't,
but again, we're talking down.
If your toilet doesn't have a lid, go buy a lid for your toilet seat
and put it down. Thank you. Finally.
Now, on a separate note, this is a completely random question.
Oh no.
Have you ever been pranked by somebody using a toilet seat?
No, thank God.
I wasn't pranked, but I was living with somebody who pranked their spouse.
Oh, what did they do?
They wrapped saran wrap.
Oh, that's terrible.
Around the toilet seat.
That's mean.
Like right before they went to bed, and they thought that was hilarious.
You know what? I'm glad that works in their system. Yeah. I would not find it funny at all.
I did not find it funny either.
I find it very upsetting.
That was incredibly gross, but I've heard that happening. Listeners, if you've had any stories of people pranking you doing things with the toilet, let us know.
No, don't. I don't want to know. I mean, listeners, please keep your toilet stories to yourself. I mean, I want you to write into us. Please write into us, Colorful Humans. I want to hear everything except about your toilet pranks. Send those directly to just put a title that says toilet pranks so that I don't open them because I don't want to know. Well, I don't need to know.
I'll read the email. I'll enjoy it. Send all your total. Here, send them to this. Send them to Rainbow Dreamcatcher the Love Pod at gmail.com.
Okay.
It's a different Gmail account that I don't really use. Send all your toilet stories there. Just send them there. Because now I'm curious.
Yeah. Why? Why do you want... Okay, you know what? No, I don't even want to know why.
Yeah.
I don't want to know, and I don't want to know why. It's fine. Yeah. All right. Question. All right. Great. Wonderful.
Thank you very much, David, for that question. We appreciate it.
For the question and the definitive answer.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
All right. Now, we have letters from our listeners.
Okay. Wonderful.
I'll pull that up. Speaking of our email account.
Love letters. Thanks for folks who are sending in information. And by the way, y'all, we read all of the letters. We take in all of the feedback. Really appreciate folks who have given us feedback, not just on the content, but also the technical side of how we are doing this. Anything that will help to improve the podcast and the delivery of this information to you, please feel free to write us. You can hit us up on Facebook. You can hit us up on Instagram. You can comment on our YouTube channel, but please let us know what we can do to improve how we are delivering the podcast. We are always working to get better and really appreciate y'all helping us to do that.
All right, this is the one from our friend Sarah, who had the engagement story.
Okay, wonderful.
Before, this is the subject on the line is long distance.
Okay.
All right. So it says, hello, y'all. My partner and I have been together for almost 7 years and recently got engaged.
Congrats.
Again, congratulations. You can hear all about it on our engagement episode. I've known him for 8.5 years, and at first we were friends who were part of the same friend group. We were living abroad in China at the time, and our friend group spent a lot of time together. One night I went out for one drink, in quotation marks, with said friend group, and we ended up kissing early in the AM in the third bar of the evening.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, get it. All right, Sarah, knock yourself out. We had some awkward text conversations, met up to talk about where to go from here, and decided to give dating a try.
Okay.
At this time, I was set to be moving to another city in 3 months, so we figured if things didn't go well, it wouldn't matter too much, and we could go back to being friends.
Sounds familiar.
2 months later, and everything was going great. We already knew each other so well as friends, and so we could skip the getting to know you part. Even early on, it felt like we were a good match and that I had found my person. He is kind, thoughtful, compassionate, smart, so funny and handsome, and thankfully he seemed to be equally happy being with me. He also wasn't the kind of guy to mess around with mixed messages, which was refreshing. We had another awkward conversation and decided that even though we had only been dating for a short while, we would try long distance.
Mm-hmm.
Long distance was hard.
Yes, it is.
It is, yeah. It helps that we discuss what long distance would look like, and we try to stick to it as much as possible. Well, at least said good morning and good night every day, the bare minimum if one of us was really busy. Otherwise, we would text and call as much as we could, and we talked on video chat once or twice a week. We also tried to fly out to visit each other in person once a month. That's nice dedication there. Mm-hmm. Though tough going, it worked, and we were reunited when he moved to be with me 18 months later. Living together was wonderful. I think it can be a real litmus test of a relationship, and I always wanted to live with someone before marrying them. You got that right. I've always said you want to test drive the car.
Oh, I'm not a car.
No, just an analogy.
I know.
Yeah. We got to design our own space, plan details together, and if we met a problem, we could talk things out. Unfortunately, in 2020, we had to do long distance again for almost a year when I flew back home because my grandmother was sick and couldn't fly back to China because they had closed their borders.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was a rough time for everybody.
The pandemic was tough.
Yeah.
We might need to do like a pandemic episode.
We did.
We should definitely do a pandemic.
Love through COVID.
Yeah.
Even though we were experienced in long distance, it sucked even more because of a big time difference and not being able to see each other in person for so long. Yeah, especially if you had established the togetherness, then to be apart again, that can be really tough. Finally, at the end of 2020, we were reunited, and it feels so good. They put it in the...
No, I saw that. Now y'all can't see me, but my eyes are rolling all.
If you're on the Patreon, you'll be able to see it. And they did put in quotation, sorry. And sorry, not sorry.
Sorry, not sorry. Y'all knew he's going to sing it.
Yeah. Have you guys had any experience with long distance? All the best, Sarah. Sarah, thank you very much for that letter. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting because we, I think when we started dating, had already established that if we were to move, that we were just going to terminate the relationship.
Yep.
Yeah.
We weren't going to try to do the long distance
We weren't going to try to do the long distance thing.
I had done long distance one time in my life prior, and that sucked ass.
Yeah, and I had never really done long distance. For my personal experience, I work with folks that are long distance partners. That can be really tough, particularly in my coaching business, right? Because there are a lot of big decisions that have to happen, big and little decisions that take place in the absence of my partner. So it is incredibly, incredibly tough. I don't have any personal experience with long distance.
And I had my experience with long distance was even tougher because this was prior to social media being a big thing. This was this was before cell phones were huge. I'm old, y'all. Yeah, this was back when, we had a
back in the day.
Back in the day when I had the rotary phone number.
Didn't even have a phone. We had to tap it out on the desk.
Yeah,
we had Morse code.
It took 2 cups and a really long string to chat back and forth. No, but it was pretty tough. I was in Southern California. She was in Central California.
Oh, I think I remember you telling me.
Yeah, and it just being away from somebody that you really want to see all the time is rough. I wonder if it's a little bit easier now with the advent of social media.
I think
camera phones and video calls and stuff like that.
I think it's easier. I think it also has its own pitfalls.
Right.
What I find particularly around, video chatting is one thing in itself, but around social media in particular is that social media adds another level of complexity to relationship because people have access to, different parts of your life and different parts of your experience, different parts of your network without necessarily having a lot of context.
Right.
And so social media can actually, I have seen, certainly help in terms of connection. But also it can be very complicated. And we should also probably do a topic.
We definitely have to do
on
social media and
relationships. Because, man, I got to tell you, social media and relationships, it be getting sticky out there. It is messy sometimes.
Stay tuned to Rainbow Dreamcatcher, the Love Podcast, because we're going to hit these topics and so many more. So again, thank you to Sarah for that lovely letter. Thank you again, David, for that wonderful question.
And congratulations, Sarah. Really happy to hear that y'all made it through some difficult, challenging times, that you stayed together, and that you found a way to be able to support a really good, loving, solid relationship, so much so that y'all are getting engaged. So,
and congratulations on that engagement. And send me a message and let me know if you're going to Scoop Fest. That's going to be anything special happening there. Yeah, well, guys, thanks again for listening to our podcast.
Yeah, this has been Rainbow Dreamcatcher,
the Love Podcast.
Thanks for listening, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.